You remember when Musalia Mudavadi said this?
Do you know, I've been telling people it's usually very difficult on African soil to defeat a president who is looking for his second term. If you go back, we now go back to the era of Moi. We move away from his first 14 years when it was single party. We now come to multipartism in 1992. When the original Ford, ile ya kina Matiba, Muliro, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, Shikuku, Paul Mwite, name them. Well, when they gathered in Kamkunji, everybody said, Moi amekwisha, hakuna njia, dunia imeenda. And there were massive defections. People were running away to defect, thinking that that is where it will be easy. Moi then told them, mimi ni profesa wa siasa, ngoja tu utaona. After a while, the original Ford was scattered into 4 pieces. 4. Moi walked back into office. Through the ballot, he won. By the time the opposition was saying, how did it happen? He had been voted in because people had cast the ballot.
Very few of you would have expected this guy to reason like this, but let me tell you this. One thing you should remember is that Musalia Mudavadi is still living in a Moi era. He still thinks that Moi is the president, or actually, you know, the people who are still in power right now are people that he worked with. So they still have that mentality. So that's why you hear him say that don't expect any change. Another thing that you will abstract from this kind of speech or reasoning is that they want to manipulate voters. They want to manipulate you into believing that, you know what, in 2027, Ruto will still be in power, that there's no way Ruto can be defeated. But the fact remains, Ruto can still be defeated. Also, from this kind of reasoning, you realize that this is a guy who is trying, you know, to save himself from political oblivion. You know, once Ruto loses, to be honest, this guy will go into political oblivion. So he's someone who is fighting for some relevance because he knows that his political future, to be honest, if Ruto loses in 2027, it is dead. Also, remember this is a guy who is resistant to change. He doesn't want to change, as I mentioned about the Moi era. So this guy still lives in the Moi era, despite this being the 21st century, where people are expecting change, where people are educated, and people want a government that serves them, not a government that serves a few. So this guy is still stuck with that. But also, very simple history would remind us that it is possible, that it has happened even in other African countries where a president seeking re-election has lost. And this began way back in 1991. Let me give you just a brief history, and I am sure he will also listen to this and perhaps learn and even change his mindset that it is very possible to have Ruto removed from office. Based on my basic research, the first African president to lose re-election was Kenneth Kaunda from Zambia. He lost to someone by the name Frederick Chiluba. And also in 1993, we had Didier Ratisrika. Okay, I haven't pronounced the name well, from Madagascar. We've also had other presidents from Benin, you know, Liberia, Ghana, Senegal. Okay, again Benin, we've had, you know, a sitting president losing an election. We've had again Zambia, Nigeria, the Gambia, you know, Ghana again. We've also had cases of, you know, a country like Chad. You know, it is very possible to lose an election. Okay, sitting presidents lose elections. So kindly, Let this guy not manipulate you into believing that it will be impossible for Ruto to lose. Ruto can still lose an election, because looking at how things are right now in Kenya, people do not want this guy to stay in office. So this kind of manipulation is something that Kenyans should fight back and ensure that the 2027 election is credible, that nobody can interfere with the electoral system, in the benefit or to benefit the current president. So it is something, or it's a conversation that Kenyans should continue, that in 2027, the election must be fair, must be square, must be honest, must be accountable, must be transparent. With all that, it will be impossible, for the likes of Kamket, Oscar Sudi, Wajia Women Rep, and many others who believe that it is still possible just to rig the 2027 election and have Ruto back in power. Because right now, to be honest, the mood in the country is that people want change, unless President Ruto does something that can change people's thinking about him. Because right now people are like, okay, this guy is just paying us lip service, giving us good speeches, telling us about his commitment to changing Kenya, transforming Kenya. But in reality, what do we see? We see corruption. We see, when we read the Auditor General reports, Kenyans are losing billions of money, to a few individuals. And this guy continues, to give us some calculated or persuasive speeches, to inspire us. But when we look at the reality, there's nothing much. So please believe it. It is possible for a sitting president seeking re-election to lose an election. And if truly Kenyans do not want Ruto, Ruto will lose that election and he will go home. So do not have what we call rational ignorance. In rational ignorance, that is actually in public choice theory, where people just say, okay, we're not going to question because we know nobody will hear us. So in this case also, you want to believe that, because it is impossible for a sitting president to lose an election, so we are not going even to vote. Okay? Do not get yourself into that. Here we shall not have rational ignorance. Instead, here your voice can be heard. So if you go into the polling station in 2027 and democratically a majority say no to Ruto, Ruto will lose that election. Even if he tries, to stick to the seat and all that, he will lose it and will go home. So do not be manipulated. Stop that kind of manipulation and believe that it is possible to elect a new president, even if the current one is seeking re-election. Believe it so firmly. Remember this. In the previous general election, Ruto was running against Raila, who was supported by President Uhuru, but still Raila lost that election. Even if there was an attempt, to change things in Raila's favor, Raila lost it. So even in 2027, if Ruto loses, he will not stick to that office. He will lose the office and someone else will take over. So don't allow this kind of reasoning from Musalia Mudavadi to mislead you, please.